Hey guys, I'm Rainey Romero with the lovely law firm. You are watching the Carolina Justice Report. I'm here with attorneys Sarah Austin and Amy Lawrence, and we are doing a deep dive back into the Murdaugh murders. So welcome back to the Carolina Justice Report. You know, ladies, last time we talked, we did kind of an overview of beginning to end of what has been happening with the Murdaugh murders, which has been a huge deal here because it happened in South Carolina, so everybody's following it. I think we left off with kind of Alec Murdock, faking, or trying to stage a death so that his son could get his life insurance policy and him going to rehab. So what has kind of happened since then?
Oh, it's so much. What hasn't happened? What hasn't happened? You know, we've seen Alec Murdock he's got 74 pending charges. Wow. They range from, multiple breach of trust, money laundering, criminal conspiracy, computer crimes. The list goes on and on and on. He's looking at like 731 years in prison. Wow. And that's just what has been brought to date. Sure. And more are coming. SLED and the Attorney General's office has made it clear there is more coming. This is just the tip of the iceberg, which I think is...
Yeah, and these charges they look like they all stem from the theft of money and mishandling of money and insurance funds and stuff like that. And they don't even address any of the murders or any of that kind of stuff that's going on. All those investigations are still happening.
Yeah.
Interesting. And we are doing a deep dive into the money part of where's the money with all of this. So you'll have to watch the next Carolina Justice Report to get a deep dive into that.
Yeah.
But has he been arrested or what's going on with him?
So Alec is sitting in the Richland County Jail on a $7 million bond. And he's in Richland County because he was a badge carrying solicitor in Hampton County. And his grandfather, he has a dynasty of prosecutors in his family. And so for the safety of him and others, I guess, they put him in Richland County, which is where he's been housed.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, so he's got all these charges. And what we're also seeing unfold is, and I think Justin Bamberg has done a wonderful job, who's an attorney. More victims are coming out of the woodwork. Wow. And during his bond hearing, we heard from a highway patrolman who was hurt terribly in an accident on the job, and we heard that he had stolen his money, right? And we heard from these victims, and one of the victims is a young man who was a paraplegic, and how he took that man's money. And so, this goes all the way back to the Satterfields is when we first found out about it, but like the victims just keep coming, and it breaks my heart because as lawyers, we're not allowed to have a bad apple. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't get to be a bad apple in this kind of profession.
Especially when you're representing injured people.
Right.
So these people need the money, and it's a lot of money that is missing. I think they're finding out. It really is just the tip of the iceberg, like what is missing and how long has this been happening.
And I think what breaks my heart also too is, because we deal with injured people all the time. This is what we do. And we know that before you settle a case, that time frame, the majority of the world lives paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
And when there's an accident, their whole life is thrown into, whether it's on the job or a car accident or, whatever, their whole life is kind of thrown into up in the air, and it's like there's no real certainty. And they're worried because they have, a house payment to make. They're broken and hurt, and they, but that house payment keeps coming, and that car payment keeps coming, and insurance has to be paid, and we've got to feed our children, and we want to make sure our babies have somewhere to lay their head, and that is really hard. And so I think one of the things that really just makes me really angry as a lawyer is that the lawyers on the civil side of this have said, we gave some of this money back, so we're even Steven, right? We gave the money back, and that's enough. But that doesn't account for all the heartache for the last 3 years where they could have had that money. You know what I mean? So that's not enough.
So will that be another trial, do you think?
Well, I think there absolutely will be. I don't think a settlement is, there has to be some kind of punitive damage here. You stole someone's money and just giving it back 3 or 4 years later, sometimes 7 years later, is not enough.
Right.
Because that could have been, the peace of mind that they needed, or the money to get their surgery that they need, whatever it may look like. And I just don't think that's enough.
Yeah.
Just
that's
giving them
interesting.
the money back is not enough. There has to be some kind of penalty for it, a punitive damage, because they're held to a higher standard and they have a fiduciary duty and they're not exercising it.
Yeah. Well, Sarah, and you and I were kind of chatting before we started rolling, and you were saying even from rehab, he was still doing stuff, right?
Yeah, and so back to Alec, because I think the last time
Yeah.
that we talked, it was right after he staged the suicide for hire insurance scam plot, and he hadn't been arrested yet, but his law license was suspended, which means he can't practice law, and he checked himself into rehab. And I think now we're finding out that he was calling clients from rehab to say, your case settled, come get your money, and they were going to the law firm to get it, or however that was, but he was still practicing law even though his law license was suspended. And at that time he had not been arrested or charged yet, but all this, it was known that all this money was missing. He put his law firm on notice that he took money or whatever that was.
Right.
So for him to still be settling cases even with these allegations pending and with his law license suspended is kind of crazy,
Yeah.
And
is a bold move.
and his law firm had to have known that that's what he was doing, because because the paperwork's getting sent to the firm.
Yeah.
to
So has the law
paralegal.
firm been shut down as well, or just him?
No one from his law firm has been charged or been suspended. Matter of fact, from what I understand, they have shut down the firm and they've reopened under a new name with the Murdoch name taken out, and they're all operating under this new
firm.
But
The only one that's been arrested is his best friend, Corey Fleming.
although I will say this, there are attorneys in his firm, his old firm, PMPD, affectionately known
PMPED.
PMPED, as pimped by Justin Bamberg, making me giggle. But he's still using their signatures for the old law firm name are still in all their emails. So it just seems odd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So let's go to Corey.
Yeah.
Who is this, and how do we know about him?
Amy probably knows more about his background and connection to Alec.
So Corey Fleming is an attorney. He is Alec Murdock's best friend, the godfather of one of his sons. And he, in this whole scenario, in the Gloria Satterfield case, was the attorney for the estate of Gloria Satterfield.
Right.
And he has been charged with, I think it's 17 charges. He was just given a bond a couple weeks ago. I think it's a $100,000 bond.
So he's out.
So he's out.
Jail.
His license to practice law had been suspended.
In South Carolina and Georgia, I think.
Because he's barred both.
Yeah, he just, which I don't know how, I did not think that the letters to ODC were public. But
I didn't either.
Yeah, we got to read that whole complaint from Georgia, which I guess we'll get into, but.
It may be the Georgia is public. South Carolina's ODC complaints. And ODC stands for Office of Disciplinary Counsel.
Okay.
And that's who does investigations if there's a bar complaint.
Okay.
There's an issue of any kind of impropriety by an attorney.
Okay.
But
So there's a lot of those in this case. But
a lot.
I guess all of this is stemming from the Gloria Satterfield case. And when I get frustrated, especially listening to the Murdaugh Murders podcast, is people confuse the civil side of things with the criminal side of things, because Alec is a defendant. He is a defendant now, a criminal defendant. He's being charged with all of these charges and sitting in jail, but he was also the civil defendant for the Gloria Satterfield case, and that's because she died at his house. And so it was his home, his homeowner's insurance policy that paid out that $4.3 million wherever it went. And then he had Gloria Satterfield's sons hire his best friend, Corey Fleming, to represent them and her estate and their interests. And then they hired their friend, Chad Westendorf, to be the personal representative of the estate. So all three, it's just so crazy to me that, we represent people's estates when people pass away all the time, and never is the defendant who owns the house best friends with me.
Right.
And they're talking so